Guys, welcome back to the Adventure of the Cosmic. I'm Cosmic, and today we are going to be catching up with our Blackmore sisters, Dead and Buried. We finished Dead Wrong earlier in our series. I suggest you go check out the first video, and I suggest you finish the entire book. I wish I could just put it into one book, but I can't because I know it would take too much. Our book is Dead and Buried. Main character is Morgan Blackmore. And we left off at chapter 15. And we got about 2.5 hours left. So so here's the email. Okay. And then we're gonna start by going over to our notes and hold up. Okay. So random guy dead. If you haven't watched the last video, I'm sorry for the spoiler. We have a random guy dead on the cliff. Okay? And the sisters are being accused by Overton because of it's called the Ocean's Revenge. And it's the sheriff and the police, I'm sorry guys. Cops found a ship's manifest. Now, I'm going to do you guys a favor, and I'm going to search up what a ship's manifest is. Legally required document that lists the cargo, passengers, and crew of the ship for transportation. Okay. Now you know. Okay. Let's play the book, shall we? We're about halfway there. So this shouldn't take too long. Hopefully Declan doesn't call again. He called like 2 times in the middle of recording.
Morgan's heart froze as she turned toward the behind her and stopped her cold. Hold it. Right there. Chapter 15. Morgan's heart froze as she turned toward the sound of the voice. Sheriff Overton. He ambled over to them, the ever-present toothpick sticking out of the side of his mouth, a satisfied smirk plastered on his face. Do you have a permit to dig here? He gestured toward the 2 holes. Permit? Why would we need that? It's our property. Morgan stood with her hands on her hips. She could see Jolene with the box sneaking away off to the side behind Overton, and tried her best to draw his attention away from her. Town ordinance. A permit is required for all machined digging. He nodded toward the bobcat. Morgan flicked her eyes toward Fiona, who shrugged. Was he telling the truth?
He is.
Morgan wished she'd paid more attention to the town laws. Overton walked over to the hole and looked in. What are you digging for? Or are you digging a hole to hide your next dead body? Morgan's shoulders stiffened, and she fought the desire to slap the smirk off his face. We're testing out soil conditions for a special herb garden, Morgan lied, sending a warning glance to the others. Overton furrowed his brow. Is that so? Morgan nodded. Yep, we're going to plant some herbs that need deep, sandy soil, so we were digging around to find the best spot. Yeah, you know how hard it is to grow plants without the right conditions, Fiona added, amidst nods from everyone else. Overton walked over to the other hole and peered in, then turned and narrowed his eyes at Morgan. He took a pad of paper out of his pocket. I'll have to write you up. That's a $500 fine. Overton smiled. Morgan's heart plummeted. They barely had enough to pay the taxes on the house. And now this? But we're only digging a couple of little holes. We're filling them in right away, she protested. Don't matter. He wiggled the toothpick back and forth as he wrote. Morgan's cheeks grew warm with anger, but she held herself back from doing something she might regret later. At least Overton hadn't seen the coin or the box. Her gut feeling told her it was better to just take the ticket and get him out of there as soon as possible than to instigate something that might cause him to linger. This needs to be paid in 10 days, or I might have to exercise my right to put out a warrant on you. Overton stared at Morgan as he ripped the paper from the pad. And put you in jail, where you belong. Morgan stared Overton down as she took the paper. Is that all?
Asshole.
I think I have cause to look around some.
For what?
Morgan's stomach lurched as he started over by the house. She knew he was looking for any little thing he could find to use as an excuse to get some sort of warrant to look inside. Sheriff, dispatch just called in. There's an accident over on Route 1, one of the uniformed cops yelled from the side of the house. Overton grunted, then spun around and ambled off, turning only long enough to shoot Morgan a warning glance. Don't forget to pay that, promptly.
Yeah.
Morgan's shoulders relaxed as he rounded the side of the house. What was that all about? I've never had that happen before, Randy asked. Don't ask, Morgan said. Overton doesn't like us, and he'll use any excuse to hassle us. The boy shrugged. It's getting pretty dark. I assume you guys are done with the Bobcat, right? Yes, we got what we were looking for. Thanks so much for helping us. You won't say anything about what we dug up, will you? Celeste added. Mum's the word. Jolene already swore me to secrecy. He gave a Scout's honor sign, started up the Bobcat, and headed toward the front. Speaking of Jolene, where did she run off to with that box? Fiona asked. I don't know. But I have a feeling it's a good thing Overton didn't see that fancy box, or the coin. The less he knows about what's going on here, the better. Cal grabbed his shovel. I'll fill these holes back in. You guys go inside. Fiona and Celeste headed toward the kitchen door on the side, but Morgan went toward the front. She wanted to make sure Overton was really gone. Her mind started to wander to the box they had pulled from the hole. What was in it? She couldn't help but think it seemed pretty small to contain much of a treasure. She glanced back. Maybe there was more buried deeper in the hole? She hesitated between going forward to the front or back to look deeper into the hole. The front door won. She wanted to see what was in the box, and they could always dig it out more later. She stepped forward before looking where she was going and ran smack into Luke Hunter.
Ooh.
What the? Whoa, you should watch where you're going. Luke smiled at her, causing her heart to skitter around in her ribcage. He had put his arm on her waist to keep her from toppling over, and she noticed he hadn't bothered to remove it. It felt familiar, exciting, and annoying all at the same time. You scared the crap out of me. You shouldn't sneak up on people like that.
Yeah.
She took a step backward, and Luke dropped his hand to his side. Sorry, I saw the ruckus and wanted to know what was going on. Luke thrust his chin toward the holes. Morgan bit her bottom lip. Should she tell him? She didn't want to. Probably because she was still hurt about the way he left 10 years ago. She felt like he'd betrayed her then and didn't see what would stop him from doing it now. Then again, he had saved them the other night, and he was too smart to accept the lame gardening excuse she'd given to Overton. We found a map in the attic. A treasure map, she said. Luke raised his eyebrows. And did you find a treasure in one of those holes? Morgan shrugged. Not really. We found a coin and a small box. Luke cursed under his breath, making Morgan's stomach clench. What? She narrowed her eyes. Was he mad they found something, or mad that it was so small? I'm sure those treasure hunters are watching you from somewhere. Luke glanced out into the Atlantic Ocean. They probably saw that you dug something up, and now they will be coming after you for it. Well, they already broke into our house once. I figured they'd be coming back. Morgan looked out at the light area, then passed into the ocean. Was there a boat out there, beyond her scope of vision, with high-powered binoculars trained on her house? Luke grabbed her upper arms, forcing her to look back at him. She noticed his green eyes were hard and cold. Morgan, this is serious. These guys are killers. She saw his eyes soften. He reached out and brushed a lock of hair away from her forehead,
Aww.
causing a riot of emotions to run through her. I couldn't stand it if anything happened to you. You have to come clean with me and tell me everything you know. And let me know what you plan to do next. She let out a sigh. I don't know what was in the box, and I'm not sure what we'll do next. I guess it depends on what's in the box. And what about Overton? What did he want? To hassle us, as usual. I told you before how he has it in for us, and I have no idea why. Yeah, I don't trust him. What about this Jake guy that was with Fiona? Can you trust him, or is he in close with Overton? Morgan thought back to how Jake had risked his own job and gone against Overton to help prove she was innocent in the Littlefield murder. She'd trust him with her life. Jake is totally trustworthy. He doesn't like Overton either. In fact, Overton is doing everything he can to keep Jake away from the case of the dead guy on the cliff. Luke nodded. Okay, good. We need all the people on our side we can get.
Our side?
Morgan shuffled her feet. She felt awkward and unsure of herself. Part of her wanted to bolt into the house, and the other part of her wanted to stand here with Luke all night. She gave herself a mental head slap. What was she thinking? We cleaned up the mess in your living room, and we're getting the glass replaced in the china cabinet. Sorry about your grandma's china. I remember how much you loved it. Morgan's heart softened another notch toward him. He remembered how much she loved that china. A variety of words tried to battle their way from her brain to her mouth, but she only managed to get one out. Thanks. Okay. Well, if you find out anything else, or see anyone or anything suspicious, call me right away. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a black business card with nothing but a phone number on it in silver. Morgan turned the card over. The back was blank. That's my private cell number. Call me no matter what time of day or night. Morgan's stomach did a somersault as he turned to go, and she stared at his back, unable to move. After a few steps, he turned to face her again. In the meantime, my man and I will be keeping a close eye on you and your sisters. Then he turned and trotted off toward the woods. She almost called after him. Then she remembered that she had no idea where he'd been or what he'd been doing for the past 10 years. For all she knew, he was the head of these treasure-hunting pirates and was just trying to worm the information out of her. Still, for a few minutes, it had seemed like old times. Like the Luke she'd once loved. She'd have to be careful. She couldn't let herself get hurt by him again. Stuffing his business card in her back pocket, she ran up the porch steps into the house, pausing only for a second to glance over in the direction that Luke had disappeared in.
Oh.
Was he watching her now? The thought made her feel safe and a little creeped out at the same time. She turned back and opened the front door, heading in the direction of the kitchen, where she could hear everyone talking. Can you guys believe this? What a jerk. She slapped the citation Overton had given her on the counter. I know. He really hates you guys, Cal said. Good thing we dug up this coin. Looks like we're gonna need some extra money. Celeste held up the escudo and turned to Cal. Are you sure this is real? Of course. I am an expert, you know.
Mm-hmm.
He raised his eyebrows at Celeste. Celeste laughed. I know. Sorry. I can lend you guys some money if you needed to pay that right away. I'm sure I can find a buyer for the coin. He pointed at the citation. Morgan looked at her sisters. Should we sell the coin? I'm not sure what to do, but I know the money would sure come in handy. Fine by me. Hopefully, there'll be plenty more inside this box. Jolene held up the little box they had taken from the hole and shook it carefully. I don't hear anything rattling around inside. Morgan's brow creased as she looked at the box. Did you open it? We were waiting for you. Fiona looked at Morgan out of the corner of her eye. What were you doing out there with Luke? Morgan felt her cheeks grow warm. What? He wanted to know what was going on. That's all. Oh? Morgan turned to the cupboard on the pretense of getting a coffee mug. He saw us digging and was wondering what we were up to. Anyone want tea? What did you tell him? Celeste asked. Morgan shrugged as she rummaged for a tea bag. I kinda had to tell him we dug up the box there, but I didn't tell him much else. Why not? He bailed us out last night. Celeste tapped her finger on her lips. Come to think of it, that was probably him that chased off those muggers. What muggers? Cal wrinkled his brows at Celeste.
Shit.
Yeah, what muggers? Fiona and Jolene said at the same time. Oops, Celeste shrugged. Well, there's really no sense in keeping it from everyone. I think we all know that we're in danger here, with the break-in last night and all. I guess you're right, Morgan said. Celeste and I got jumped the other day when we went to see Cal. What? Why didn't you say something? Cal's eyes clouded over with concern. Well, we got away. Celeste kicked the crap out of the guys, and we ran off. Then some other guys came out of nowhere, and I guess they took care of the attackers. Hey, I wonder if those other guys were Luke's guys, Celeste said. Morgan remembered how she had thought she'd seen Luke that day. I think it might have been, now that I remember. I thought one of them looked like Luke. And you still don't trust him? Fiona raised an eyebrow at her. You don't trust Luke? Cal turned to Morgan. Well, it's not that I don't trust him. It's just that we don't know anything about him anymore. Cal shrugged. Geez, Morgan. We've known Luke since we were kids, and he was always a good guy. A few years in the military probably hasn't changed that. Are you sure you aren't letting your emotions get in the way of your better judgment? Morgan bristled. I just think we need to be really careful. I know you're still hurt about the way he left, but I think he was doing what he thought was best for you, Cal said. Yeah, he seems like he really is on our side, Fiona added. Well, we'll see. I know we can trust each other, and anything else, well, Morgan shrugged, looking at the little box that Jolene had set on the breakfast bar island in front of her. Forget about Luke. Let's open this thing up and see what's inside. Jolene pushed the box toward Morgan. Go ahead. Morgan stared at it. It wasn't very big. Not much bigger than a couple of decks of cards. It doesn't look like it could hold much of a treasure. Fiona sounded disappointed. You can say that again. I was wondering if there might be more in the holes, Morgan said. I mean, a tiny box like this hardly seems worth all the trouble we've had with these pirate guys and everything. Are you gonna open it and find out, or what? Jolene's fingers drummed on the counter. Morgan looked at the front. This one didn't have a lock like the last one. It had a button. Morgan pressed it, and the lid flew open. Her stomach dropped. The box was empty, except for a brittle piece of paper. Fiona, Jolene, Cal, and Celeste bent their heads over the box to look inside. That's it? Jolene scrunched up her face. Maybe this one has a false bottom too? Fiona crouched down so that the bottom of the box was eye level. Morgan carefully picked out the piece of paper and laid it on the island in front of her. The faded, swirly writing was similar to that in the journal. You'll find the key you seek beneath the tree we vowed our love. Oh, geez. Another cryptic clue. What the heck does that mean? Jolene blew out a breath strong enough to cause her wavy bangs to puff out. I don't know. What tree do you think it means? Fiona asked. Who knows? That tree could be long gone by now.
No.
The note was written almost 300 years ago, Morgan pointed out. Fiona picked up the box, inspecting it from all angles. I don't think there's any hidden compartment in this one. Geez, what a letdown. Yeah, I knew all this pirate stuff was silly, Morgan added. Well, I guess it gives us something to think about, Cal said. In the meantime, I'm going to set up camp in the spare bedroom. What? Morgan scrunched her eyebrows at him. Are you being stalked by one of your girlfriends and need to hide out here? Everyone giggled. Cal was known for being a ladies' man, but he often had a couple of girls going at the same time, which sometimes got dangerous for him. No, Miss Smarty Pants. I'm staying here until you guys are out of danger. I don't want to leave you guys alone to get attacked again. And Jake is staying too. In fact, he should be here any minute, Fiona added. Morgan pursed her lips. Normally she would argue. As the oldest Blackmore, she felt like she could take care of her sisters by herself. But her common sense prevailed. They'd already been attacked and broken into. Having two strong guys here couldn't hurt. Okay, thanks, she smiled at Cal. Come on, I'll help you pick out a room. Celeste stood up. The house had 12 bedrooms. Some were closed off, but they still had quite a few guest rooms for Cal to choose from. Morgan suppressed a yawn. Yeah, I'm pretty tired. I think I'll go upstairs and read or something. Maybe I'll get an inspiration about what the tree we vowed our love means. Let's hope so, Fiona said. I don't want to be looking over my shoulder for pirates for much longer. Morgan nodded. Or worrying about finding dead guys on the cliff. Chapter 16. Morgan was surprised that she'd slept so well the night before. She hated to admit it, but knowing that Cal and Jake were in the house, and Luke had an army of men watching them, made her feel secure. Too bad she hadn't come up with any ideas about what the writing on the paper meant. I think today is going to be a good day, Fiona said, as she opened the door to sticks and stones. Well, no one tried to break in.
Okay, so, weird thought. So, earlier in the book, there was this description about this tree that had a description, like, you know those, like, little, like, carvings and stuff with, like, the heart, the names, or the initials of, the people, like, the girlfriend or the boyfriend on top, and then the other one on bottom. I think they know it's talking about that tree.
And no dead bodies appeared on the cliff, so it's already shaping up to be pretty good in my eyes, Morgan replied, as she turned the sign on the door to open. I have something for you. Fiona rummaged in her jewelry case, coming up with a pendant on a chain. The stone was a rich honey brown, shaded from dark to light. Morgan held her hand out, and the gemstone sparked as one sister handed it to another. It's Tiger's Eye, Fiona said. It will help protect you. Morgan narrowed her eyes at the stone. A week ago, she might have scoffed at the idea of a rock protecting her against anything. But after seeing Jolene's wound heal so quickly, and the odd things that had been happening, she didn't know what to think anymore. She fastened the necklace around her neck as she looked out the back window of the shop. Hopefully, I won't need to be protected. Fiona shrugged. Better safe than sorry. Morgan pursed her lips as she looked into the forest behind the shop. The birds hopped between branches. Squirrels scurried around on the ground. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw something white streak by.
Belladonna!
Was that who she thought it was? She opened the window and poked her head out. What are you doing? Fiona asked. You won't believe who I thought I just saw. In the woods? Who would be there? Oh, wait. You don't mean... Yep, it's her. Morgan stared at Belladonna, who sat at the bottom of the ancient oak tree, staring back at her. This wasn't the first time the cat had shown up here, and Morgan had no idea how she even knew the way. Granted, it was only about a mile from their house, but Morgan's stomach clenched at the thought of the cat running around in traffic. Fiona came to the window. I don't know what gets into her. Who knows? Morgan shrugged. I guess we should bring her inside. At least we can make sure she gets a ride home with us and isn't out wandering the streets. Morgan went out through the back door of the cottage. Belladonna had started digging under the tree and scooted away from Morgan when she tried to pick her up. Belladonna, come! The cat ignored her. Want a treat? Belladonna dug even faster. You know cats don't fall for that stuff, Fiona said. What is she digging for? I have no idea. Probably a mouse or something. Mew! The cat glanced back at them, then returned to digging. Well, it's an old tree. Morgan didn't hear the rest of the sentence. She was busy looking up at the initials carved in the tree. Her heart jerked as if someone had zapped it with electricity. You'll find the key you seek beneath the tree we vowed our love. This is it. Morgan's mind whirled. Do they have any shovels here? Huh? Fiona frowned at her. This is the tree from the clue in the box. Look at the initials. She pointed upwards, and Fiona bent her head back. I.B. and M.B.
Isaiah
Do
Blackmore.
you think that's Isaiah Blackmore?
And
Morgan nodded. Yep, this land has been in our family for generations. In fact, I think we owned all of it around here at one time. Morgan grabbed a hoe and trowel they used for putting flowers in the front garden from the side of the cottage. Here, you use the hoe to loosen stuff up. I'll dig with the trowel.
Mariah.
Morgan handed the hoe to Fiona. Belladonna sat back and watched the sisters dig. They fell into a rhythm, Fiona churning up the dirt and Morgan digging around after her. Morgan was just starting to wonder if they should close the shop when her trowel scraped against metal. I've got something.
Yep.
She reached into the hole, her stomach flipping as her fingers slid over cold metal. She brushed away the dirt to reveal gleaming silver. What is it? Fiona had squatted beside her. I think it's a box. Morgan wiggled the corner, and it slid out of the dirt. She held it up, feeling slightly disappointed. The box was small, smaller than the last one. It fit in the palm of her hand and was only about an inch high. The finish looked like a match to the last box, finely detailed silver in a flower pattern. That's kind of small. What's in it? Fiona asked. Morgan looked at the front. It had a push clasp, similar to the other box. She felt a stab of disappointment. The box was too small for any real treasure. She pressed the clasp, and the box popped open as if the hinges were just oiled yesterday. Morgan stared at the contents. An old skeleton key sat gleaming on a blue velvet lining. A key? Fiona asked. I wonder what it goes to. I hope it's something good. This treasure hunt is getting tedious. Morgan nodded. Maybe her ancestor had a warped sense of humor, and all these clues led to nothing. Or maybe the treasure had been taken years ago. But if it was, why would the treasure hunters be so keen to find it? They must have something pretty solid to think the treasure was still around. Morgan felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Her heart lurched. In her excitement of figuring out the clue, she'd forgotten that the treasure hunters could be watching. We'd better get inside, she said, glancing around. They could be watching us, and we don't want them to know we dug up another clue. Right, Fiona said, as they quickly shoved the dirt back into place, then scurried in the back door, leaving the trowel and hoe leaning against the cottage. Belladonna squeaked through, in between their feet, and found a sunny spot to curl up and sleep in. The girls stood in the center of the shop, looking at the shiny key that lay flat in the palm of Morgan's hand. I wonder what it goes to, Morgan asked. I hope it's something good. This treasure hunt is getting tedious. The logical place to look would be... Morgan was interrupted by the sound of the door being jerked open. The girls swiveled their heads toward the door, and Morgan's stomach dropped when she saw a giant of a man standing inside the doorway. I'll take that, the giant said, as he turned the shop sign to closed and slammed the door shut. Morgan closed her hand and took a step backwards as the man lunged for the key. Her heart pounded as he advanced on them, backing the girls further into the shop. Hand it over, and I won't have to hurt you. His harsh, angry voice sent chills up Morgan's spine. No, she said. His eyebrows shot up, and his face turned red. Then he lurched forward, grabbing for her arm. Some of Celeste's quick moves must have worn off on her, because Morgan shot her elbow out at exactly the right moment, and it connected with his nose, making a sickening crunching sound. Blood spurted out of the giant's nose, and his hands flew up to cover it. He bent forward at the waist, stumbled, and stepped on Belladonna's tail.
Yikes.
Belladonna screeched and flew through the air, landing on his back with her claws fully extended.
And that's why you have a cat.
He let out a wail, flailing with one hand toward his back as he straightened up. Morgan saw Belladonna slide down his back, leaving a trail of claw marks.
Ooh.
He spun around, reaching for the cat. Damn cat! Belladonna flew up to the top of the bookcase and sat there hissing and spitting at him. Out of the corner of her eye, Morgan could see Fiona grappling behind her, her hands flailing around the display where she kept her geodes. Her right hand found the largest one, which was about twice the size of a candlepin bowling ball.
Oh my god, that's huge.
The giant turned his attention back toward the girls. His face was twisted in anger as he closed the distance between them quicker than seemed humanly possible. His arm shot out toward Morgan. Her heart lurched in her chest as his large hand wrapped around her throat and squeezed. She tried to struggle, but that only made it worse. Her vision started to fade. Pinpricks of stars floated in front of her eyes as she watched Fiona smash the geode right into the giant's face.
Yep.
he went down with a crash and lay still on the floor.
Oh my goodness.
Morgan sucked in a deep breath. Are you okay? Fiona stared at her. Yeah. Her voice sounded raspy, and her fingers flew to her throat, which felt raw. We better tie him up, in case he wakes up before I can call Luke, Morgan said, thankful she had put Luke's card in her pocket this morning before work. Fiona ripped open a drawer and pulled out some twine. I hope he's not dead. She looked at him uncertainly.
Oh, come on.
Morgan bent over the still body.
It wouldn't be that bad if he was dead.
Belladonna hopped onto his stomach and sat there. He's breathing. He's not dead. Morgan held out her hand
I
for the twine.
want that motherfucker to be
She
dead.
had no idea how to tie someone out to restrain them, but she'd have to do her best. Help me flip him over, and then we can tie his arms behind him. The girls got on one side and pried him over onto his back. Morgan caught a glimpse of Fiona's wrist as they pushed him over, and her heartbeat quickened. The stones on Fiona's bracelet were glowing. Look at your bracelet. Fiona looked down. What the heck? It's never done that before. The girls were staring down at the bracelet when the door to their shop jerked open a second time.
Oh god.
Chapter 17.
Please tell me it's Luke.
Morgan's heart jolted, and she ripped her gaze away from the bracelet, bracing herself for another fight. Luke. What happened? Are you okay? Luke was at her side in a second, his green eyes clouded with concern. I'm fine, she said, her voice still a little raspy. Then she motioned toward the giant on the floor. This guy must be one of those treasure hunters. Your throat is all red. Did he hurt you? Luke put his hand tenderly on her neck to inspect it. Morgan's pulse quickened, a warm glow spreading throughout her body. Her hand flew up to her throat on instinct. He tried to strangle me, but I'm okay. Luke stared at her for a few seconds more, and then narrowed his eyes at the guy on the floor. What did he want?
Good man.
Morgan caught Fiona's glance and knew her sister was right. It was time to tell Luke everything. Remember the box we dug up yesterday? Morgan asked as Luke opened the door, making hand motions apparently to someone outside. Yes? He glanced at her while he held the door open for 3 guys who got busy tying up the giant. It only had a piece of paper in it, but that paper was a clue, Fiona added. A clue that led us to the giant tree out back. We dug around and found this. Morgan opened her fist to show him the key. What does it go to? Luke asked. We don't know. Morgan flipped the key over. We've been going on some sort of treasure hunt. First, we found a passage in this old journal we had in the attic. That led us to an old box that had a map in it. We followed the map and dug the holes yesterday, which had another box where the clue was to dig under the tree here. Luke raised his eyebrows at her. And the dead pirate in your yard. What do you know about him? Nothing, Morgan said. Well, except that Overton said he was found with a manifest from a ship called the Ocean's Revenge that was supposedly captained by some relative of ours. That's why we went to look in the journal in the attic in the first place. Luke nodded. Is there anything else I should know? Morgan shook her head. Well, there is one thing, maybe 2, Fiona interjected. Morgan and Celeste were attacked the other day. Yeah, I saw that. Celeste has a mean karate kick. So you were there, Morgan said. Yep, we've been here, watching things for a while. Luke stepped aside to let the men drag the giant outside. What was the other thing? Oh, I think Fiona is talking about the boats, right? Morgan cocked an eyebrow at her sister. Yep. A customer said she saw boats going back and forth in the water around the entrance to the cove at 2 in the morning, Fiona explained. Luke frowned. Have you seen the boats? How many nights did they do this? We haven't seen them. Morgan looked at Fiona. I think it was only one night, right? Fiona nodded. As far as I know. Luke rubbed his chin. They were probably trolling for sunken treasure. That's what Jake said. Luke nodded. Sometimes pirates would sink their ships on purpose in an out-of-the-way place so no one would get the treasure. They would come back and retrieve it later. The treasure hunters were looking for a sunken ship, but if they haven't come back, that probably means they didn't find any evidence of one. So then, why are they still bugging us? Fiona asked. They didn't find any evidence in the water, but they sure do think there is something in this area. So now, they are going to focus on the land. Morgan shuddered. So, we just have to find it first then, right? It's not really that simple. And you guys shouldn't be digging around without talking to me. In addition to sinking their ships, pirates were well known for booby-trapping the places they buried their treasure to protect it from thieves. Whoever came digging around to steal it would meet with an untimely and unpleasant end. You guys need to be careful that you don't get caught in a booby trap when you are digging. Morgan's eyes went wide, and she ventured a look out to the tree and back. Luke read her mind. That's right, you could have been hurt. Or killed today or last night. The treasure hunters aren't your only worry here. Luke paused, and his green eyes turned serious as he looked at Fiona and then back at Morgan. Now that they know you are getting closer to the treasure, they'll probably step up their efforts. We've reduced their numbers, but I think there are still a few of them out there, and they'll stop at nothing. I know you guys like to take care of yourselves, but I'd like to have some of my guys in the house with you, Luke said. We have Cal and Jake staying over. Morgan stuck out her chin stubbornly. Luke nodded. So far, nothing too bad has happened. We defused the situation with a break-in, and you and Celeste were able to outwit the attackers the other day. But you might not always be so lucky. He narrowed his eyes at Morgan. By the way, how did you know to pull Celeste back from that alley just at the right moment? Morgan felt her stomach clench. Should she tell him the truth about the strange things that were happening? Her gut instincts told her yes. I just had a gut feeling, and Celeste said that Nana told her to tell me to trust my gut feelings. It worked out pretty good in that case. Your Nana, isn't she dead? Luke switched his gaze from Morgan to Fiona. Yes, Fiona said. Apparently, Celeste has been talking to dead people. You know how she was always kind of spiritual, what with all her meditation and stuff? I guess she connected with the other side. Luke looked down at Morgan and shook his head. Carnelian stones that heal wounds. Dead people giving you guys advice, and gut feelings that save you from getting abducted? I guess it's going to be a challenge for me to get reacquainted with the Blackmore girls. Luke took Morgan's hand, and her heart fluttered as he pulled her to him. I have some things to take care of, but I'm coming to your house tonight. By the way things are heating up, I think I need to keep you girls under very close surveillance, and I'm not taking no for an answer. Then he kissed her cheek, turned on his heel, and left. Morgan's heart took off like a thoroughbred at the starting gate. She felt that familiar pull in her lower belly. She had to admit, the thought of Luke keeping them under close surveillance wasn't really all that unpleasant. But then she felt a warning tingle in her gut. After all the hurt he had caused her 10 years ago, she couldn't let herself fall for Luke Hunter all over again. Could she? Chapter 18. We need to get home and into the attic to look for the box that key opens. Fiona picked up the geode that still lay on the floor and returned it to its place on the shelf. Right. Morgan stood staring at the door Luke had just disappeared through, wondering what his kiss on the cheek meant. It was really just a peck, but was it a friendly peck or something more? Earth to Morgan. Fiona was standing at the door, Belladonna under one arm. Oh, sorry. Morgan followed her out the door, and the three of them climbed into Fiona's old truck. We should call Celeste and Jolene and tell them what we found, and about the attack, Fiona said, as she pulled out onto the main road. Morgan pulled out her cell phone and made the calls. They're both home, and so is Cal. Looks like we'll have plenty of help. Belladonna had curled up in Morgan's lap, and she stroked her silky fur with one hand as she looked at the key with the other. I have no idea what this would go to. A trunk? Or another box? Fiona glanced over as she turned onto the road leading to Perkins Cove. I don't know. I mean, what are the odds that whatever it opens is even in the attic? Morgan nodded. But we really don't have any place else to try. They made the rest of the short drive in silence, and Celeste, Jolene, and Cal were standing at the door when they pulled into their driveway. Celeste and Jolene ran over and hugged them. I can't believe you guys got attacked, Jolene said. Are you all right? Yes, it turns out we can take pretty good care of ourselves, Morgan said. But I'm still thankful Luke was there to pick up the pieces. Fiona winked at Morgan, and she felt her cheeks grow warm.
Yay.
Let's see this key. Cal held out his hand, and Morgan put the key in it. Oh, yeah, this is an oldie. He held the long skeleton key up to the light, squinted at it, then handed it back to Morgan. Geez, Cal, I hope we aren't keeping you from going to work. You don't have to watch over us day and night, Fiona said as they started up the main stairway. It's okay, he answered. I have plenty of people to keep the shop running, and I could use a little break. Plus, I'll take any excuse to get back up into your attic and get my hands on all those antiques. The girls laughed, and Celeste swatted at him as they emerged into the attic. Morgan stood at the top of the stairs and looked around. I have no idea where to start. She looked tentatively at Belladonna. She felt a little silly thinking the cat could show her the way, but Belladonna had led them to many important finds in the past. This time, though, the cat simply curled up by the window, gave Morgan a blank stare, and started cleaning herself. Follow your intuition, Morgan, Celeste said. I mean, really dig deep and see if you get a feeling for where we should look. Morgan took a deep breath and closed her eyes. She tried to focus on her feelings. Was there a specific part of the attic that stood out? She felt herself drawn toward an area in the very back and started moving toward it. She stopped in front of a door and looked back at Cal and her sisters. I think it's in here. Her pulse kicked into high gear as she pushed the door open, the hinges squealing in the silent attic. Inside was a small room, probably 10 feet by 8. It looked like it had once been one of the servants' rooms, but now it held boxes stacked almost from floor to ceiling, along with haphazard piles of stuff. Cal walked over to one corner and started rummaging in a pile. These are really old, he said, holding up a silver creamer and sugar. And look at this thing. Jolene pointed to a long sword that stood against the wall. Fiona had started looking through one of the trunks, and Celeste rifled a pile of linens. Morgan was busy sorting through a box of what looked like old pewter cups when she heard Fiona gasp. She jerked her head in Fiona's direction. Her sister was sitting on the floor, staring into a box. "What is it?" Morgan shuffled over to see what was so interesting. Fiona pulled what looked like a pile of burlap out of the box and laid it on the floor. Morgan's stomach flittered with butterflies as she watched her sister slowly open the flaps. An array of gemstones and crystals lay inside. Morgan marveled at how they sparkled in the light, and then her stomach squeezed when she realized the ones closest to Fiona were actually glowing. "They're beautiful," Morgan said, watching as Fiona reached for a brown stone in the corner. Morgan recognized it as Tiger's Eye, the same stone in the pendant Fiona had given her. Her hand flew up to the pendant and closed around it. It felt warm, and she drew in a sharp breath when she saw the stone on the burlap glow as Fiona's hand touched it. "What's that?" Celeste joined them. "Old crystals." Fiona dropped the Tiger's Eye and looked up at them. "Well, all crystals are old, but these look like they have been here for centuries." "They probably have, judging by the age of the other stuff in this room," Cal said. "Looks like one of our ancestors was into crystals and gemstones, just like you,"
Mariah
Jolene
Blackmore.
added. "Yeah, I guess so." Fiona folded the burlap flaps back over the crystals, and Morgan noticed the faint outline of printing on the material. "Wait, what's that?" She pointed to the letters. Fiona squinted down at it. "Looks like initials? MB. Guess I'll have to research who that was. Do you guys mind if I take these?" No one minded. Fiona wrapped the crystals back up, and the group got busy rummaging through the items. Morgan was just starting to feel like the whole exercise had been for nothing when she heard a sharp intake of breath from the other side of the room. "Hey, guys, I think I found something." Jolene was crouched down in the corner, boxes pushed out of the way on either side of her. Morgan rushed over and looked down, her heart lurching up into her throat when she saw what had caused Jolene to call out. There, on the floor in front of them, was a box very similar to the other boxes they had found. Like the others, this one was silver, with gold on the corners and an ornate carved flower design. But it was much bigger, about 1.5 feet long and 6 inches wide. Morgan reached down and picked it up, her pulse picking up speed as she held it. "Wowzer, that's one nice box," Cal said. "Does the key fit it?" Celeste asked. Morgan found a table off to the side and put the box on top, then took the key out of her pocket. She held her breath as she lined the key up with the hole in the lock. She inserted and turned. Click. The top flew open. Inside was a long piece of leather, rolled up tight. The outside was dry and cracked with age. "Be careful with that," Cal warned. "Old leather can be very brittle." She lifted the leather out and placed it on the table, then unrolled it very slowly. Her heart beat faster and faster as the images and writing inside were revealed. It was a treasure map.
They gotta keep that hidden.
Chapter 19. By the time they brought the map down to the informal living room, Jake had come home from work and joined them. They spread it out flat on the coffee table. Morgan inhaled the smell of old leather as she bent over to study the lines of the map, which had been crudely burned into it. "This looks like our yard, but it's shaped different," Jolene said. "The geography of this area was changed about 100 years ago, when the area started becoming attractive to tourists," Cal replied. "Yeah, I remember reading about how the channel to the cove was made deeper, and the cove itself much wider. Then, on the other side, some land was filled in near Oreweed Cove, where it abuts our land. Celeste pointed to the different parts of the map as she talked. So, our land, as it sits now, is here and here. Morgan drew a circle with her finger to indicate where she thought the land was. I think so, Cal said. So part of this isn't even our land. You're right, but the important part looks like it is. Cal pointed to the big X in the middle of the map where the supposed treasure was. Morgan squinted at the map. It did look like the treasure was buried somewhere near the point of land at the edge of their property, near where the body had been found. She glanced outside. Plenty of daylight left. We should start dig... The knock on the door interrupted her, and she raised an eyebrow at the group. Anyone expecting company? Nobody was.
Hide this.
We should hide this just in case. She gestured to the map, and Celeste and Jolene got busy rolling it up and finding a hiding spot. Morgan and Fiona went to answer the door that the insistent visitor was now pounding on. Hold your horses, I'm coming. She ripped the door open, and her heart froze when she saw who was standing there.
Overton?
Sheriff Overton. And he wasn't alone. He had several uniformed policemen with him, and they looked like they were there for backup.
Uh-oh.
But why would he need backup? Well, about time. Hope you aren't trying to hide any evidence, because it's too late, Overton said with a
Where's your
smug
warrant?
smile
Give me
on his
the
face.
warrant. Where's your warrant?
What are you talking about? Morgan stood feet apart, fists on her hips. She didn't invite Overton in, but he opened the screen door and stepped in anyway.
Nuh-uh.
The commotion had caused everyone else to gather in the hall.
Nuh.
Oh, good. I see you're all here. That'll make it easy to arrest the killer. Morgan's heart clenched. What was he talking about? Fiona narrowed her eyes at the sheriff. No one invited you in, so you can turn around and leave. Oh, I don't think so.
Where's your warrant?
See, I got this little piece of paper here that says I got probable cause to bring the killer in for questioning.
Okay.
The toothpick switched from one side of his mouth to the other
You're
as
dumb.
he pulled some papers from his front pocket and shoved them in Fiona's face. Morgan felt her anger rising. I already told you I had nothing to do with killing that guy. Overton looked at her and nodded.
Celeste.
Yep, and much to my surprise, you were telling the truth. Morgan scrunched her face at him. It's not you I'm here to arrest. It's her. Overton pointed past
dare you-
Morgan's shoulder. Her heart squeezed as
Celeste?
she turned to follow the direction of his finger. It was pointing straight at Celeste. What? Cal boomed, putting a protective arm around Celeste.
Aww.
You can't just come in here and arrest people with no evidence.
Where's your evidence?
Oh, I have evidence. Overton smiled his Cheshire cat smile. Found the murder weapon right in little Blondie's car.
Okay, so...
What are you talking about? Morgan shot a glance at Celeste, who looked as baffled as she was. Yep, the coroner got back to us this morning. The victim's head was bashed in with a round object. Oh, about this big.
Mm-hmm.
Overton cupped his hands to illustrate a circumference of about 6 or 7 inches. Morgan narrowed her eyes. And you found one in Celeste's car? Yep, just happened to notice it when we were here last night. He turned to one of the uniforms behind him. Show her. Morgan's eyes widened as the gangly kid held up a large plastic bag with one of Celeste's kettlebells inside.
Okay, so,
The handle makes him perfect for getting a good swing for bashing someone's head in, wouldn't you say? Overton raised his eyebrows at Morgan. Those are for exercising. Morgan louvered her eyes between Overton and Celeste. This had to be some sort of mistake, or one of Overton's tricks. Let me see that. Jake pushed forward and grabbed at the paper Overton had shown to Fiona. He glanced over it, then looked at the kettlebell. Is there forensic evidence on that? We haven't run it through the lab yet, but I'm sure it will prove to be the weapon. Overton stepped over toward Jake, taking the toothpick out of his mouth. You better keep your nose out of this. In fact, I think I'll put you on administrative leave until this case is over. Jake opened his mouth to protest, but Overton put up his hand to stop him. I should have you fired for consorting with known criminals, he said, jerking his chin toward Morgan and Celeste. He turned to the uniforms behind him. Now, cuff her and take her away.
No.
Cal stepped in front of Celeste. Now, just wait a minute. The uniforms froze and looked back at Overton uncertainly. Better step aside, Reed, or I'll have you brought in for obstruction of justice.
What
Celeste
justice?
pushed in front of Cal, holding her wrists out together in front of her. It's okay. I'll go with them, and you guys can come and post bail. I'm not worried, since I didn't kill anyone. Morgan was impressed with her sister's calm demeanor.
Wow. I would be pissed.
It took everything she had to step aside while they cuffed Celeste and brought her out to the car. But she knew it was the best thing to do. As soon as they were gone, she'd be on the phone to the lawyer and working to get Celeste out of jail. There was nothing she could do right now to stop it, though. So she let them take her. We'll be down right behind you, she said to Celeste as they led her by. Celeste nodded. No hurry. Morgan stood in the doorway,
Oh yeah, there's
her fists clenched and the map all but forgotten, as she watched them shove Celeste into the back of the police car and drive away.
Oh, please.
She'd never felt so helpless in all her life. We have to get her out right away. I don't want her spending one night in there. Morgan turned to face the group, her mind whirling. I'll get on the phone to Delphine, Fiona said. Delphine Jones was the sharp-witted lawyer they had used when Morgan had been accused of murder earlier in the summer. She'd done a fantastic job, and Morgan couldn't think of anyone better to help Celeste. I'll put in a call to some of my friends at the station. Jake whipped out his cell phone. We'll need money for a retainer, Morgan said. Don't worry about that, Cal replied. I'll give you whatever you need for the lawyer. We're not taking your money. Consider it a loan, then. What you have in the attic is worth plenty of money. You can sell some of it later if you want, but for now, I have cash at the ready, and we don't want to hold up getting Celeste out. Morgan nodded. He was right. Delphine's going to meet us down there, Fiona said as she headed out the door. Morgan, Cal, and Jolene followed. Jake stayed behind. His presence at the station wouldn't help things after the run-in he'd just had with Overton. Delphine Jones was already in the police station parking lot when they pulled up in Cal's pearl-white Lincoln Navigator. She was on her cell phone, pacing back and forth in front of her car, arms gesturing wildly. Her hot pink jacket and pink, white, and orange broom skirt fluttered in the breeze behind her. She hung up when they pulled up next to her. Okay, give me the quick version. She tapped her nails on the hood of the Lincoln as Morgan told her how Celeste's kettlebells were the suspected murder weapon for the dead body on the cliff. Was there any evidence on the weapon? Overton said they hadn't run them through the lab yet. Delphine narrowed her eyes in the direction of the police station. Jerk. She spat the word out like it was sour yogurt. Morgan knew from their previous dealings that there was no love lost between Delphine and the sheriff. She didn't know why, but Overton seemed afraid of the feisty lawyer, and Morgan knew that worked to their advantage. Can you get her out? Fiona asked. Sure. Well, I might need a judge, especially if Overton is playing games with the murder weapon and delaying the testing. But I'll do my damn best to get her out tonight. They started off toward the police station entrance. I'll go straight into Overton and see if I can get him to release her, and you guys can go down for a visit. A blast of cool air hit Morgan as they entered the lobby, and her stomach clenched, remembering when she had been arrested. Delphine headed off to see Overton, and Fiona demanded that they be allowed to visit Celeste. Someone came out and led them down to the cells. Morgan's nerves grew more tense with each step. They filed past 4 empty cells. Celeste was in the last one, the same one Morgan had been in. Morgan peered into the cell, her heart pounding, wondering what kind of condition her sister was in. Celeste sat on the bed, cross-legged, her eyes closed, breathing steady. She opened one eye, then the other, as a smile lit her face. "Oh, hi, guys. You didn't have to come so fast," she said, as if they had dropped in for a leisurely Sunday afternoon visit. "Celeste, are you okay? Did they hurt you?" Cal's face was lined with concern.
Aww.
Morgan narrowed her eyes at him. They were all concerned about Celeste, but Cal seemed overly so.
Aww.
What was up with that?
Cute.
"Oh, I'm fine." She waved her hand. "It's not that bad here. The bed is comfortable, and it's a great place to meditate. Very quiet, and lots of emotional energy." "We brought Delphine, and she's going to get you out," Fiona said. Celeste got up from the bed and came over to the edge of the cell, looking out at them through the bars. "I think I might be staying here tonight, but I don't want you guys to worry. I didn't kill that guy, so I won't be here long. You need to focus on taking care of the guys that are after us. I have it on good authority. It's only going to get worse." "What? You're not going to have to stay here," Jolene said.
Fortunately,
"I'm afraid she is." Delphine came rushing toward them. "I need a judge to let her out, and they've all gone home, but I promise I'll get her out first thing in the morning." Morgan felt like she'd been punched in the gut. "Seriously? But she didn't do anything." "I know. Sometimes the wheels of justice move backwards." Delphine patted Morgan's arm. "It's okay, guys, really. Go, take care of things at home. Brandon's bringing me a lobster dinner, and I'll be quite comfortable here." Celeste waved them off, and Morgan saw Cal and her sisters reluctantly turn toward the door, their tense faces echoing Morgan's worries. They filed past Celeste, hugging her through the bars and saying goodbye. Delphine was already halfway down the hall when Morgan got her turn. Celeste grabbed her arm and held her back. "Make sure you study that map. I don't know why you need to, but you do." Celeste's ice blue eyes drilled into her own, and Morgan felt an electrical current surge through her veins. She nodded, and Celeste let go of her arm. "Now, get out of here. I'll see you tomorrow. Oh, and Nana says, be nice to your guest." Morgan frowned at her. Guest? She was still wondering what Celeste meant when she climbed into Cal's car in the parking lot. Chapter 20. She didn't have to wonder for long.
Uh-oh.
Luke was waiting on the front porch when they got home.
Aww, cute.
Sitting in the white wicker settee, drinking a beer next to Jake, who was in one of the rockers. Making himself right at home. Cal ran over, and the two of them got reacquainted with the usual backslapping and handshaking. They'd been friends before Luke left, and as far as Morgan knew, hadn't seen each other since. Morgan's stomach flip-flopped as she approached the porch. Probably from all the excitement with Celeste, she reasoned. Surely it had nothing to do with how good Luke looked, sitting on her porch, drinking one of her beers. "How did it go? Where's Celeste?" Jake stood up from his rocking chair, greeting Fiona with a peck on the cheek. "Delphine couldn't get her out until tomorrow." Morgan felt her chest squeeze as she said it, and she realized she was surprisingly close to tears. Cal paced the porch. "Is there nothing we can do?" "Short of going down with a nail file and a cake and breaking her out, I don't think so," Jake said. "She'll be okay. Is there anyone else in there?" "The other cells were empty," Jolene replied. She'll be fine. We don't get too many criminals in there, so she'll probably be alone. I guess I should say they don't, since I'm officially on leave. Jake pressed his lips together. Besides, my contact at the station assured me they'd treat her like a queen. Probably be like a vacation for her. Yeah, she did say someone named Brandon was bringing her lobster. Cal frowned. Jake nodded. That's Brandon Burchard. He'll take good care of her.
No.
Morgan noticed Cal's frown deepen. Well, I don't know about the rest of you, but I could use a drink. Fiona reached for the door handle, and everyone lined up behind her. Except Luke. Does someone want to fill me in on what's going on? He frowned over his beer. Morgan will. Fiona shot over her shoulder as she went inside. Morgan glanced at the door, then at Luke, her stomach flopping around like a fish out of water. They were alone on the porch. Why did that make her so nervous? Luke reached over and grabbed her hand, pulling her to the settee beside him.
No.
What's wrong? You look upset. He brushed a lock of hair behind her ear, sending her pulse skittering like a frightened rabbit. Celeste got arrested for murder. Her voice cracked on the last word, and the tears she felt sting her eyes earlier threatened to spill out. It made her feel vulnerable. She hated feeling that way. She noticed that Luke had pulled her down close to him, and she slid away to the other side of the settee. At least she could think better over there. Jake filled me in a little. He didn't tell me too much, though. Probably didn't know how much he should tell me. I guess he doesn't trust me fully. Luke turned his sea-green eyes on her. Do you? Morgan's breath caught in her throat. Did she? Well, you have helped us out of a few spots now. But you've been gone for so long. I don't feel like I know you anymore. She picked at the wicker arm of the settee, avoiding his gaze. I'm the same person I always was, just a little better traveled. Morgan looked at him and realized he had slid a little closer to her.
Aww.
She pressed herself into the corner. Well, you'll excuse me if I'm not brimming over with trust. You disappeared out of my life 10 years ago, and I haven't heard a word from you since. Morgan tried to ignore the flutter in her stomach and act nonchalant, as if that was old news that barely affected her now. He sighed and took a pull on his beer. Staring out at the ocean, he rubbed his dark, short-cropped hair, which made it stick out as if he'd just got up, out of bed. Morgan tried to push the memories of other times when she'd seen his hair like that out of her mind. He put his beer down and turned to face her, his arm up on the back of the settee. She suddenly became very interested in studying her hands, which were clasped in her lap. I didn't want to just walk out of your life, but I had to do what was right for you. It wasn't fair for me to expect you to wait for me. He put his thumb under her chin and gently turned her face toward him. I thought about you every day. Her heart squeezed in her chest. Did he really? She realized he'd slid over even closer to her.
No.
Suddenly he was leaning toward her.
Damn it! We had
She
to
could smell the
cry!
spicy scent of his aftershave and feel the heat radiating from his body. She flattened her palm on his chest to push him away, except she didn't push very hard.
Oh no.
Beneath his thin shirt, she could feel hard muscle and the steady beat of his heart. She wondered if it was beating as fast as hers as she watched his lips get closer.
Oh?
Before she knew what was happening, her eyes were drifting shut, and his lips were brushing against hers.
Oh?
Tenderly at first,
Nah.
then pressing harder.
Oh?
She sighed and relaxed into his kiss.
Aww.
Meow. Belladonna
Damn
jumped
cat.
up onto Luke's lap, and they jerked apart like two teenagers caught necking behind the rectory. Hey, this looks just like the cat you used to have. Luke reached down to pet the cat, who had curled up in his lap and was staring up at him adoringly. It is. Luke wrinkled his brow at her. It's the same cat? She must be ancient by now. Morgan bit her lip as she thought about that. How old was Belladonna? She'd had her since she was a kid, which would make the cat in her late teens. How long did cats live, anyway? Her stomach clenched, thinking her cat might be nearing old age. She'd never thought much about it, but Belladonna had always been around. She didn't know what she'd do without her. Morgan realized her earliest memories included the cat. That's impossible, she thought. It must have been a different cat. Her mother always doted on the cat, and probably got another one that looked just like her when the first one passed. Her thoughts were interrupted by the cat thwacking her arm with her tail as Luke petted her. She'd never heard Belladonna purr so loud. So, anyway, tell me about the key. Did you find the lock it fits in? Morgan took a deep breath and told him about the search in the attic and the leather map. In fact, we were trying to figure it out when Overton came to the door and arrested Celeste. Can I see the map? Sure, it's right inside. Luke dislodged Belladonna from his lap, and she grunted out a discontented meow as the two of them went inside. The map's in the informal living room. You remember where that is? Luke smiled that disarming smile he had, and Morgan's stomach turned inside out. Why did he have to be so damn handsome? He started walking toward the room, and she couldn't help but check him out. He'd always been tall and well-built, but she could see that he'd put on some weight in the past 10 years.
Good weight or what?
And judging by what she'd felt through his t-shirt, it was pure muscle. Thinking of that reminded her of their brief kiss, and she felt her cheeks heat up. She pushed away any of those type of thoughts about Luke before the heat could spread to other parts of her body. It was just as well the cat had interrupted their kiss. She couldn't deny she was still attracted to Luke.
Uh-oh.
But he'd be gone after this was all over.
Maybe.
And where would that leave her? In the living room, the map had been spread out on the table again, and everyone was discussing the various instructions so intently they barely noticed Luke and Morgan. Jake glanced over. Hey, Luke, what do you make of this? It says 2 steps as the crow flies. What does that mean? Luke rubbed the stubble on his chin. Usually it means straight ahead without having to go around an obstacle. That's strange. There's no obstacle there. Jake pointed to a spot on the map, then looked out the window. Well, sometimes they wrote up trick maps, or put the instructions in backwards, or in code, Luke said, in case the map fell into the wrong hands. I guess that explains why we dug the hole in the wrong place last time, Morgan said. That's right. I thought we had followed it wrong, but what really happened is that it was written backwards. Jolene pointed out the window to where they had dug up the box. See how we were digging over there? But the box was found on the opposite side of the yard. So, do you think this map could be written backwards or in some sort of code? Fiona raised a brow at Luke. It could be. He stared down at the map. It's impossible to tell, but the thing is, you need to be really careful in case the treasure is booby-trapped. Oh, that's right. Cal looked up at them wide-eyed. I had forgotten that pirates routinely did that. We could blow ourselves up. Not only that, but now that the pirates know you have the key and are getting close, I'm sure they are going to step up their efforts to try to get the treasure from you. Morgan's heart squeezed. Luke was right. The danger was getting worse, and there was no sign of it letting up. She knew she had to do something to stop it. She just wasn't sure exactly what. I'm not sure I like the way things are heading. We need to be proactive instead of waiting for them to attack us. Fiona echoed Morgan's thoughts. What prompted Overton to arrest Celeste? Luke asked. He was poking around in her car and saw something the same shape as the murder weapon, Fiona replied. And what was that? Kettlebells. Huh? Luke cocked an eyebrow at her. They're like weights for exercising, but they have a handle and a round ball on the bottom. You kind of swing them around. Jolene made swinging motions with her arms. Luke ruffled his hair and looked out the window. After a few seconds, he turned back to the group. Are they about this big? He cupped his hands, making about a 7-inch circle. Yes. He nodded, then did more staring out the window. Okay. I think I have an idea that might help us get the treasure hunters off your back and give Overton the real murder weapon, which will clear Celeste and put the real killer in jail. He looked around the group, staring each of them directly in the eye in turn. But I'm going to need one of you to act as a decoy.
What?
Chapter 21. Morgan felt bats flapping around in her stomach as everyone stared at Luke in silence. A decoy? That sounded dangerous.
Hey guys, I'm gonna be back, but I'm gonna leave the audiobook with you because I've listened to this book already, okay? Hold up, I gotta play it first.
I'll do it, she blurted out. Luke narrowed his eyes at her. Morgan, it could be dangerous. Duh. No, it should be me, Jake volunteered. Or me, Cal added. Luke sighed. It has to be one of the girls, otherwise I'd do it. The treasure hunters won't bite if it's a guy. They'll be expecting it to be one of the Blackmore sisters, and, well, they won't be as intimidated by a woman. Well, that settles it then. I'll be the decoy. I'm not letting Fiona or Jolene do it. Morgan's mind was made up. Luke raised his hands in a gesture of defeat. I guess you're right. I don't like it, but there's no other way. So, what do I do? I need you to lure the treasure hunters out into the open. I haven't been able to get the ones we captured to talk, and I can't figure out where the rest of them are hiding. I think they are on those boats you guys saw, but they could be docking them anywhere, and they're probably moving them around all the time. I'm not sure I like the sounds of this. Fiona narrowed her eyes at Luke. Me either, he said. But they know you guys are getting close, and I think they realize they won't have many more chances. They'll probably send most of their guys, considering what's happened the last 2 times. All I need is for Morgan to pretend like she has some sort of a lead, and that will get them swarming. What do you mean? Jake asked. We know they are watching, because they were on Morgan and Fiona pretty quick today when they dug up the key. So I'm thinking that Morgan can act like she's onto the treasure, or has another clue, and start digging. I figure if we do it at sticks and stones, we won't lead them to the real treasure here. Luke turned to look at Morgan, and if Morgan is alone, she'll make an easy target. Morgan's stomach clenched, but she straightened her back. She wasn't one to back down from a challenge. Okay, let's go. Well, hold on. I need to put my men in place. We'll be watching you every second, of course. And I'm also going to have you wear a wire so we can hear you and rush in as soon as possible. That will be the safest way. I could never forgive myself if anything happened to you. Morgan's heart melted at the tender look in Luke's eyes. So, we'll do it tomorrow, he said, then turned to the rest of the group. If everyone agrees. Only if you're sure Morgan won't get hurt. Jolene's blue eyes challenged Luke. I won't let anything happen to her. Jolene nodded. Okay by me, then. I guess we don't have much of a choice, Fiona said. The sooner we can get this all over with, the better. Agreed, Jake said, and Cal nodded. Okay, then. I better get things
back,
going,
guys.
Luke said. I'm going to leave through the side door, over by the cove. I can use the cover of the hedges in case the bad guys are watching. We don't want to tip them off that we've been planning anything. I'll show you out, Morgan heard herself say, then convinced herself that it wasn't that she wanted to be alone with him, it was the polite thing to do. They crossed the hallway and went through the kitchen to the butler's pantry that led to the side door. The small area on this side of the house had been one of Morgan's favorite places since childhood. It was like a secret garden. A rounded trellis covered in pink roses framed the door. Colorful flowers sprouted up on either side, and 2 honeysuckle bushes sent a sweet perfume through the air. The shrubs, about 10 feet away, enclosed the area in a private cocoon, and a wrought iron bench with a stuffed canvas cushion tucked away under a large oak tree made a perfect place for reading. Morgan stood on the top step, and Luke a step down, his eyes level with hers. Are you sure you're okay doing this? Luke had caught her by the wrist, and her heart skipped a beat. Yeah, of course. We need to do something, right? She shrugged. Luke looked thoughtful for a few seconds, and Morgan felt a warm summer breeze flirt with her cheek. It was dusk, that magical moment when the daylight fades and the moonlight takes over. She could smell the flowery perfume of the honeysuckle and hear the summer peepers cheeping away. How many other nights had she and Luke spent listening to peepers in the dusk? She could feel the heat where his hand encircled her wrist, and was suddenly intensely aware of him. She saw indecision in his eyes, and then they turned dark with desire. His hand left her wrist, and he wrapped it in her hair as he pulled her toward him. She didn't resist, even though she knew she should.
No.
Instead, she met his lips eagerly, her arms snaking around his neck, her body pressing closer to his. His lips were warm and tasted sweetly salty. They were familiar, but different somehow. She briefly wondered how many other women had tasted those lips in the past 10 years, as Luke's arm encircled her waist, pulling her in even closer. The feel of his hands on her body sent tiny frissons of pleasure shooting through her, reawakening the passion that had lain dormant all these years. Luke curled his hand around Morgan's soft, silky hair as she responded to his kisses, heating his veins with passion. He let his hand fall to her slim waist, her hips, and then down her backside.
Oh?
He pulled her hard against him, and
Oh,
a
the
moan of
naked.
pleasure almost brought him to the brink of no return. He shouldn't be kissing her like this, but he couldn't help it. In the past 10 years, he hadn't met anyone else that could even come close to matching his feelings for Morgan.
Aw.
He was beginning to question why he ever left here in the first place, and in the back of his mind was already coming up with a plan for sticking around after this was all over. But first, he had to do whatever he could to make sure Morgan was safe tomorrow, and that was going to take a lot of thinking and planning, which meant he better stop kissing her while he could still think.
Oh?
Reluctantly, he pulled away. Looking at her in the twilight, his heart flipped in his chest at how beautiful she was. Her raven-colored hair shone in the moonlight. He brushed a silky strand away from her face and gazed into her half-closed, ice-blue eyes. Desire burned in his veins as his thumb traced the line of her bottom lip, all pouty and swollen from their kiss. He fought off the urge to pull her close and kiss her again. He knew this time he wouldn't be able to stop, so he stepped away, plunging his hands into the pockets of his cargo pants.
Ooh.
You don't have to do this, you know. The decoy thing? Tomorrow, I mean. I can figure out another way to get rid of the treasure hunters. He hoped she'd change her mind and decide not to, but he knew she wouldn't. He would have called the whole thing off, but he also knew how stubborn she could be, and figured she'd do something crazy on her own, especially if it helped prove Celeste wasn't the killer. It was better to follow through with his plan, so he could keep an eye on her. Luke saw her dreamy, half-closed eyes snap wide open, and her back stiffen. No, I want to do it. I'm not afraid of some old pirates. Don't even think about trying to talk me out of it. Luke took his hands out of his pockets, spreading them wide. I wouldn't dream of it, but I want to make sure you're comfortable with doing this. And I also want to make sure you don't get hurt. He reached out, running his fingers lightly down her arm. He could see suspicion lurking behind her narrowed eyes. Better quit while you're ahead. He backed away, his heart squeezing tighter with each step. He suddenly felt like a schoolboy after his first kiss, not knowing the right thing to say.
Aww.
He cleared his throat, taking another backward step. I'll be here first thing tomorrow, then, to let you know the exact plan. Morgan nodded. Okay.
Aww.
Then he turned, his heart pounding as he disappeared through the shrubs.
Are they gonna get back together? Who
The
knows?
job he had ahead of him was probably the most important one he'd ever had.
Aww.
He had to make sure the plan was perfect. His whole future depended on it. Morgan stared at Luke's retreating back and kicked herself for falling under his spell so easily.
Aww.
Her fingers flew to her lips.
He's hot,
still
okay? What
burning
can I say?
from
The
his
guys in
kiss.
here are hot!
He sure kissed her like he meant it. But what Morgan couldn't figure out was why. The past 10 years had made it perfectly clear that he didn't have room for her in his life, and she certainly had no intention of being just a passing dalliance. Her hand closed around the cold metal of the doorknob. Better to get on with the task at hand than to stand there wondering. The sooner all this pirate stuff was over with, the sooner Luke Hunter would be gone from her life.
You say that like
Hopefully,
that's a bad thing.
this time for good. But right now, she had something more important to do. She slipped inside to the butler's pantry and made her way to the informal living room. She was glad to find it empty. She didn't want to answer any embarrassing questions about her and Luke tonight. The map was still laid out on the table. She sat down on the couch to study it. Celeste's parting words echoed in her head, and she was learning that it was smart to follow Celeste's advice. Staring down at the lines in the map,
Or take pictures
she
of it, girl.
realized something wasn't quite right. The map was a series of markers with lines leading from one to the next and some sparse instructions. Presumably, you would follow the lines and find the treasure at the end. But something about the lines wasn't right. She could feel it in her gut. Morgan closed her eyes and pictured the map in her mind. It seemed to float, almost three-dimensionally, as if the map was drawn for terrain that was at different elevations, instead of a straight line on flat ground. A sudden sound in front of her made her heart lurch. Her eyes flew open, her body tensing. She relaxed when she saw it was only Belladonna. The cat had hopped up on the table and sat on the map, her tail swishing over the corner of it, blue eyes staring intently at Morgan. Morgan remembered how the cat threw herself at Luke earlier. Traitor. Belladonna simply blinked at Morgan, licked her paw, washed her ear a couple of times, then continued staring. Morgan returned her attention to the map, studying it as she was instructed. Belladonna sat patiently on the table, and Morgan couldn't help but wonder if the cat knew something she didn't. Morgan could feel her eyes growing heavy.
Maybe like a cave with water?
It had been a long day, and an even longer one was in store tomorrow. Her chest constricted at the thought of being a decoy, but she had to do it. Her family was being threatened, and if she could make it go away, then it was worth the risk. She wandered into the kitchen and made a cup of chamomile tea to help her sleep. Where was everyone? A quick glance at the clock told her it was late. They were probably in bed, and that's exactly where she should be, trying to get a good night's sleep. She'd need her wits about her tomorrow to deal with the bad guys.
Roll the map, roll the map.
Luke Hunter. Chapter 22. Morgan was up early the next day, anxiety seeping into her every pore, making her jumpy and jittery. She hadn't slept well, but figured coffee was a bad idea, so she padded down to the kitchen in her bare feet, black tank top, and favorite pair of faded jeans for some tea. Fiona, Cal, Jake, and Jolene were quietly sitting at the kitchen island, staring into steaming mugs of coffee. I guess I'm not the only one up early, Morgan said, as she hunted in the cabinet for her favorite mug. Yeah, who can sleep with Celeste in jail and you acting as some sort of decoy? Fiona raised a sleepy eyebrow. Morgan shrugged. I'm sure I'll be fine. And Delphine will get Celeste out today. Yeah, we're going to meet her in a little bit, Cal said, looking at his watch. Morgan's heart thumped. They were all going off to get Celeste out of jail, and she'd be going off to get captured by pirates. Morgan will be perfectly safe and under our watchful eye with these gadgets, Luke said from the kitchen doorway, as if freeing her mind. Everyone swiveled in his direction. He was dressed in a black t-shirt that somehow managed to show off every muscle in his chest and arms, along with black cargo pants and big steel-toed boots, also in black. Morgan's heart thumped even harder. How did you get in here? Oh, sorry, I snuck in. Didn't want to come to the front door in case anyone was watching. Luke shrugged. I wasn't kidding when I said you guys should get an alarm system. Morgan narrowed her eyes at him, taking in the 3 small items he was holding in his hand. What are those? These are your lifeline. This will allow us to see everything going on around you. He held up what looked like a barrette in his right hand. And these will let us hear everything. He held up a pair of earrings in his left. Jolene went over to inspect the items. These are pretty cool, unobtrusive. Do they really work? Like a charm. You want to try them out? I'd love to. Actually, I was hoping I could kind of tag along and see how the whole process works. Luke frowned at her. I'm taking some private investigator courses and a computer forensics course. It would be really helpful for me to see some real-life stuff. Morgan noticed that she was giving Luke that wide-eyed look she always gave Morgan whenever she wanted to talk her into something. Apparently, it worked on Luke, too. Luke pursed his lips. Okay, but don't be alarmed by my men. They can be kind of gruff. And don't get in the way. I won't. I've seen gruff guys before. Jolene winked at him. Morgan realized there was a whole bunch she didn't know about her little sister. Luke crossed the room and leaned against the counter next to Morgan, who focused on sipping her tea while trying not to notice how good he smelled or looked.
Stop.
Okay, so here's how we're going to do this. We'll set Morgan up with the camera and audio. I have several guys in strategic locations, and we can monitor her on these. He reached into his cargo pants and pulled out a small tablet. That looks like an iPad, Jolene craned her neck to check out the device. It's very similar, but specialized for surveillance work. Cool. I'll also be watching Morgan directly with high-powered binoculars, as will a couple of my associates. We should be able to see and hear everything and rush in as soon as the other guys try to grab her. Morgan took a deep breath, setting down her mug. Well, it all sounds very simple and easy. When do we get started? Luke looked at his watch. Well, what time do you usually open the shop? Around 8. You should go there like normal. Open the shop and then walk around out back in the woods, like you were looking for something. Maybe it would be a good idea to take a piece of paper, like you are following a map. Bring a shovel, like you did the other day, and start digging. Luke shrugged. Then just let things happen. We better run. Fiona got up from her chair and hugged Morgan. Good luck. Morgan's heart squeezed and her stomach felt heavy with dread. She shook off the brief thought that this could be the last time she talked to her sisters. Thanks. Say hi to Celeste for me. Cal and Jake hugged Morgan, then slapped Luke on the back and filed out. Luke looked at Jolene. You can come with me, but you need to change into all black, so you'll be less noticeable. Jolene's eyes lit up, and she jumped off her chair. I have just the outfit. She raced out of the room, leaving Morgan and Luke alone. Morgan feigned interest in her mug of tea, her heart racing like an overwound toy.
Ew.
Luke moved closer to her,
Ew.
holding the earrings and barrette. Let me help you get these on. I can do it. She grabbed the items, accidentally brushing his hand with hers, sending sparks running up her arm. Her hands were shaking as she stabbed the earrings at the holes in her ears. Luke leaned back, hands crossed over his chest, with an amused look on his face as she rammed the barrette into her hair. It's crooked, he said, reaching over to straighten it. He let his hand linger, then ran his fingers down the length of her hair, all the while moving closer and looking at her with those damn sea-green eyes. He leaned in. Was he going to kiss her?
Oh.
Did she want him to?
Oh!
Morgan's heart jerked in her chest, either from the task ahead of her or the closeness of Luke. She didn't know which.
Task.
But either way, kissing him wasn't on her agenda this morning. She backed away, ignoring the look of disappointment and confusion in his eyes. Let's get this over with. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Morgan's pulse raced as she punched in the security code at sticks and stones. The hairs on the back of her neck prickled. She knew Luke and his men were watching, but who else was? Inside, the shop seemed unusually quiet. Every creak and groan of the old floorboards set Morgan's heart skittering. She wasn't used to being alone in the shop, and she felt a heavy weight in the pit of her stomach, wishing Fiona was there with her. She puffed her cheeks and blew out a long breath of air. Better get to it. Digging in her purse, she pulled out a piece of paper that would serve as her fake map and made her way to the back door. The trowel she'd used the day before was still leaning against the cottage, and she grabbed it, then headed off into the woods. Morgan's heart raced as she wound her way through the trees, pretending like she was following instructions on the map. She clutched at the pendant Fiona had given her the day before. It felt warm, pulsating with energy. Holding the paper in front of her, she walked east a few paces, then turned and walked north. The woods, that always seemed so friendly and inviting, took on a dark and foreboding air. Every noise set her nerves on edge. A movement to her left set her heart jerking wildly. She whipped her head around and sighed when she realized it was only a squirrel scurrying up a tree. She stopped at a giant pine that looked like it had been there for centuries. Squatting down, she placed the map on the ground next to her and cleared away the leaves and pine needles before shoving the trowel into the dirt. Her heart was beating so loudly, she wondered if Luke could hear it in the audio. Surely he could hear her raspy breath and see her shaky hands as she dug. She tried to push away the heavy feeling of doom that was growing in the pit of her stomach. The bad guys would come. Then Luke would rush in and capture them, and it would all be over. At least, that was what was supposed to happen.
Uh-huh.
But why did she feel like there wasn't going to be a happy ending?
Uh-oh.
A movement to her right caught her attention.
Mm-hmm.
Another squirrel? Then a movement behind her caused her to jerk her head in that direction.
Uh-oh.
Her heart exploded
It's an
in her
ambush.
chest when she saw them rushing at her from all directions. She bolted up and tried to run, but strong, hairy arms grabbed her. Morgan struggled, kicking out, trying to wriggle out of his grasp. Her eyes darted around frantically.
Oh, no.
Where was Luke? Her nose twitched as it was struck by a cloyingly sweet smell. She saw a red bandana rushing up to her face. She tried to jerk her head away, but the hairy paw held it in place as the bandana covered her nose and mouth.
She's been
Morgan's
gagged.
eyes bulged. Her lungs gasped for fresh air. Her struggles grew weaker. And then, everything went black.
Ah!
Luke jabbed at the buttons on the tablet in frustration. Why wasn't this thing working? He'd seen Morgan go into the shop, but once she was inside, the video feed had turned to static. He couldn't hear the audio either, but that was probably because she wasn't saying anything. Is something wrong? Jolene peered over his shoulder. This feed isn't working right. Luke turned the display on the tablet toward her. Jolene looked at it, then glanced through the shrubs toward sticks and stones. Electromagnetic interference, she said. What? Luke wrinkled his brow at her.
Oh, wow.
There's something weird going on at Sticks and Stones. I'm not sure if it's the building or the land, but every time I go there, I feel a surge of energy. My hair gets all staticky and stands on end. It's weird. Jolene turned to face him. If there was some strange energy field there, would that interfere with your device? Luke pursed his lips together. An electromagnetic energy field? It seemed rather far-fetched, but then some of the other things going on around the Blackmore sisters were pretty far-fetched. So why should this be any different?
Mm-hmm.
I suppose it could. Luke tapped on his headset to communicate with the rest of the team.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone have a good display? He got 5 negative responses. So, no one can see or hear what's going on? More negative responses. Anyone have a visual with binocs? I think she's still inside. I'm looking at the back door, a voice replied in his ear. Luke grabbed his binoculars and trained them on the cottage. They were situated about 1/8 mile away, on a ridge behind some shrubs facing the south end. He didn't see anyone.
Uh-oh.
He jabbed at his tablet again, his stomach clenching when neither the visual or sound worked.
No breathing?
If he couldn't see or hear Morgan, then she could be in real danger.
Mm-hmm.
There she is, a voice in his ear announced, and Luke picked up the binoculars again. This time, he could see Morgan come out the back door of the shop with a piece of paper in hand. He watched her grab a trowel and head off to the east. Beside him, Jolene raised her binoculars, pointing them in the same direction as his. He scanned the woods, looking for movement. No one else was near. He turned the binoculars back on Morgan just in time to see her turn and disappear behind a tree. "Shit," Jolene muttered beside him. The thick tree trunk blocked their line of vision. Morgan must have been traveling straight north, because Luke couldn't see her at all. He glanced down at the tablet, his heart thudding against his ribcage. It was mostly static, but he could see flashes of video now. The woods looked clear. Another flash of video, and the angle changed, as if Morgan was bending down. In the next flash, he saw the trowel move toward the dirt. Luke alternated between the binoculars and the tablet, his muscles tense, heart racing. And then he saw an explosion of activity from several places in the woods. His heart lurched in his chest as he saw the men were dangerously close to Morgan. He dropped the tablet and binoculars and burst out of his hiding spot, heading straight for the woods as he gave the command on his headset. "Go, go, they got her." As he ran toward the woods, his heart sank to his stomach. The static on the video had caused them to miss the bad guy's arrival and had given them an advantage. He hadn't planned on letting them get anywhere near Morgan, and now it looked like they had gotten very close. He burst into high gear, his legs pumping faster than they ever had. He didn't know if the GPS tracker on his devices would work with all the static interference, and he had to get to Morgan before they took her anywhere. Otherwise, he might not be able to track her. He just hoped he wasn't already too late. Chapter 23. Morgan slowly drifted out of darkness to consciousness. Her back pressed against something hard and damp.
Uh-oh.
Her nostrils stung with the sharpness of the salty sea air. She opened her eyes for a second, then had to squeeze them shut to fight a wave of nausea. Where was she? Through half-opened eyes, she saw that it was dark wherever she was, but she could see a light a few feet away, some sort of lantern. She opened her eyes all the way. Above her was solid black, no stars or moon. She was inside somewhere. No, not inside. Underground. She rolled to a sitting position, thankful the nausea seemed to be disappearing. Her pulse quickened as she looked around. She was in some sort of cave. The walls were rock, and the floor hard, compacted dirt. It was damp and smelled of the sea. Was she below sea level? The room, if you could call it that, was big, with a few empty crates in the middle, and a large iron door that was set into a stone opening on one end. She could see a tunnel and flickering light through the open bars. Her heart stuttered when she saw iron chains bolted onto large metal plaques in the stone wall in various places around the room. Was she in an old pirate's dungeon? She heard voices coming from the direction of the iron door, and her blood turned cold. Was it the men who captured her? What did they want with her? She could hear them laughing, and her nerves zinged with anxiety as the voices drew closer. "Oh, I see you're awake." A large man with an unruly red beard unlocked the padlock on the door and came into the room along with another dark-haired man. Morgan backed up as they approached her. Redbeard stopped about a foot from her. He smelled like he hadn't bathed in a month.
Ew.
And she could see crumbs in his beard. Her stomach turned over, and she tried not to gag. "What do you want?" She tried to make her voice sound strong and powerful, but it came out in more of a squeak. The two men looked at each other and laughed. "We want to know where the treasury is," Dark Hair said, stepping a little closer. "I don't know where it is. Morgan touched her earrings, wondering if Luke could hear what was going on. Did these things work in caves? She tilted her head to the side so the barrette faced the two men, just in case. Sure you do. You found the map by now, didn't you? The real map, I mean. Not that fake one you had when we nabbed you. Morgan's heart squeezed, and she thought about the leather map. She hesitated too long before answering, which set off more laughter. Then Redbeard got right in her face, and his eyes weren't laughing or smiling. They were hard and cold. Her blood froze in her veins. No more games now. You're gonna show us what's on the map, or that young sister of yours is gonna have a very bad day. Morgan's heart clenched. What do you mean?
Oh, no.
Have you done something to her? Blackhair laughed. Not yet, but if you don't give us what we want, she'll wish she was never born. Redbeard looked at Blackhair out of the corner of his eye. Yeah, and she's just your type, isn't she?
Oh,
The
shit.
two men laughed lewdly, and Morgan remembered Celeste's warning to memorize the map. Could this be why? Was she supposed to tell them where the treasure was? If I tell you what's on the map, how do I know you still won't hurt my sister? You don't, but you also don't have any choice. So you might as well spill, or
Girl.
I'll let you watch us hurt all of your sisters
What?
before we do the same to you.
Fuck.
Morgan's heart dropped in her chest. She didn't have much of a choice, and drawing them a map would buy her time, and hopefully, in that time, Luke would be able to find her and dispense with the bad guys.
Okay, I might have a dirty mind here, but, I don't know why, but, I don't, okay, Jolene's like, what? Let me think, like 17 or something like that? Oh my god, I'm nervous. Very young sister of yours, like, the youngest sister is Jolene, and, dude, I will be damned if you hurt Jolene. She's my favorite sister, mostly because of Deadly Intention. Because I'm crazy as I'm not gonna tell you anything about it because it'd be spoiler, and but it's a really great book. But like, wait, Rough Guys? No shit. Sorry, my mind like, I've been around Gruff Guys before. The shit does Jolene do? No, I'm scared. I am scared right now. Like, and this is not my usual. This is because I've like, you listen to it the first time, and then you're like, oh, okay, that's happening. And then when you analyze it more, you're like, oh shit. Because I don't know why my mind goes to places in here, okay? It goes to crazy places. So, we're just gonna not talk about that. But if any of you guys can think of what I'm thinking, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's not good, that's for sure.
Okay, I'll draw it for you. Redbeard produced paper and a pencil, and Morgan used one of the boxes as a surface for the drawing. She contemplated drawing the map wrong, but her gut feeling told her to go with what was exactly on the leather map, as she had memorized it. When she was done, she handed in the paper. Are you going to let me go now? The two men laughed. You think we're stupid? We're gonna check this out, and then maybe we'll let you go, he said, then glanced down at the paper. Unless you tried to trick us with a fake map, then we'll come back and make you wish you hadn't. Morgan shivered at his words,
Cannonball.
rubbing her upper arms as the men turned to leave. She watched them slam the iron door shut and lock it, then listened to their retreating footsteps echo off the walls. As soon as they were out of earshot, she ran over to the door. She pushed. She pulled. It wouldn't budge. She looked down at the lock, remembering how Jolene had popped the lock on the box with a hairpin in the attic. It wasn't the same kind of lock, but she took the barrette out of her hair and tried anyway. The only thing she succeeded in doing was mangling the barrette. Morgan pressed her back against the wall, her stomach sinking like a lead ball. She was trapped. She slid down the
Her
wall
earrings, her
to a
earrings,
sitting
her
position
earrings.
and put her face in her hands. Meow.
Yes, Belladonna!
Morgan jerked her head up and looked toward the iron door. Nothing was there.
Yes,
More insistent
yes,
this
yes,
time.
yes, 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 yes,
But
yes,
the
yes,
cave-like
Belladonna.
walls acted as an echo chamber, and she couldn't tell where it was coming from. Meow. That sounded just like Belladonna. Morgan stood up, swiveling her head from side to side.
Aww,
She
Belladonna.
walked to the far end of the room, the one that was furthest away from the lantern. Her eyes adjusted to the darkness, and she saw the cat sitting near one of the chains that hung from the wall. Where did you come from?
Aww.
Morgan bent down to pet her. She must have snuck in through the bars of the door when Morgan had her head in her hands. Did that mean Luke was coming? The cat weaved her way around Morgan's ankles, then headed over toward the wall. Meow. Morgan looked over. The cat was in front of a giant iron plaque that held in one of the chains that came out of the wall. Then suddenly, she was gone. Then back again. Belladonna was going in and out of a big hole in the wall, just behind the plaque. Morgan rushed over and poked her head in. It looked like there was some kind of passageway or tunnel behind there. Too bad the opening was only big enough for her head. If she could just move the plaque a little more. She pushed, but it didn't budge. Belladonna poked her head out of the opening. Meow. Okay, I'm trying. Morgan braced herself against the floor and pushed on the plaque with her feet. It moved an inch.
Oops.
She pushed harder.
Oh.
Another inch. She pulled back her leg and kicked out with all her might,
Damn.
and the plaque slid about 6 inches. Just enough to fit her body through. Belladonna poked her head out again, then turned around and flicked her tail as if for Morgan to follow. Morgan took one backwards glance at the room, then wriggled through the hole into the tiny tunnel on the other side. The smell of rotting seaweed and dead fish made her want to vomit. Morgan had to crawl on her hands and knees, as the tunnel wasn't big enough to stand in. The bottom was slimy, and she shuddered to think what that slime was. Every so often, her fingers would touch something squishy, and her stomach churned, wondering what icky creatures lived there. It was dark in the tunnel. She could barely see Belladonna's white tail, like a flag, waving in front of her. As she crawled along behind it, she realized she had no idea where she was. Underground somewhere, but where? And how far underground? The smell of the ocean was strong, so she figured she must be on the coast, but that could be a dozen places near where she was captured. She realized she had no idea how long she was unconscious. They could have taken her anywhere. It seemed like she was going uphill, hopefully toward the surface. She'd had about enough of the damp underground. The passage got increasingly larger, until she could almost stand up. Her hands and knees were bruised and bleeding from crawling, so she stood as best she could. She still had to bend over a little, but walking upright was much faster. After a minute or two, she noticed it was getting brighter in the tunnel, as if there was an opening not too far ahead. At least, she hoped that's what it was. She picked up the pace.
Okay.
Suddenly, Belladonna stopped short in front of her. Morgan felt the floor beneath her shake. She heard a strange rumbling sound. Belladonna looked back at her, then started forward at a trot. Morgan did the same, her heart beating wildly against her chest as she noticed small rocks becoming dislodged from the sides and top of the passage. Bang! The explosion blocked the passage. Morgan watched in horror as the walls and ceiling seemed to cave in before her eyes. Her heart seized as she looked in front of her, just in time to see a large rock hit Belladonna.
No.
The cat fell, then sprang up again, but Morgan could see more rocks heading toward her. Without thinking, she threw herself on top of Belladonna to shield the small cat from the onslaught of rocks. 2 seconds later, the entire tunnel collapsed, burying them both.
No.
So this is what it feels like, to be buried alive. The stones and dirt lay heavy on Morgan, pressing the air out of her lungs as she waited to die. She could hear voices and wondered if they were spirits welcoming her to the other side. Maybe her mother and grandmother would be there. She wondered if she'd come back as a ghost and start talking to Celeste. The voices were getting louder, the air in her lungs getting smaller. Was the pile on top of her getting lighter? Or was that her spirit departing? She could hear rocks scraping. Then she felt someone tugging at her arms. I've got her. Was that Luke?
Or is that Cal? Or is that Jake?
Which
one? Which one of the guys?
As she felt the pile being cleared away on top of her. Strong arms tried to turn her over. Someone brushed the hair away from her face.
Aww.
Morgan, can you hear me? She nodded, then slitted her eyes open. Luke's face was hovering above her, his eyes clouded with concern. He reached down and tenderly touched her face.
No.
Let's get you out of here, he said, scraping at the rest of the rocks.
They're so
Morgan's
loud.
heart lurched when she remembered Belladonna. The cat was right underneath her, but she didn't feel her moving. Her heart dropped. Was Belladonna dead?
No.
Tears stung her eyes.
Not the cat.
As she wriggled free
Not
from
the
the
cat.
tree, looking underneath where she had been for a sign of the cat.
Sorry, guys.
But there was none. Luke pulled her the rest of the way out and took her in his arms, kissing her face, her
Aw.
lips, her forehead. Jolene was hugging her from behind, but Morgan was still thinking about the cat. Wait. Morgan pushed away from them, and they looked at her with alarm. Belladonna is still in there. She may be hurt. Morgan practically sobbed out the words.
Aww.
What are you talking about? Jolene raised an eyebrow at her. She's sitting right here.
Oh my goodness.
Morgan
Belladonna.
looked over to where Jolene was pointing. Belladonna sat on the grass next to the rubble-filled hole Morgan had just come out of. Her fur white as snow. No sign of injury. Calmly licking her paw as if it was just another regular day. Morgan felt a surge of relief run through her body as Belladonna looked up at her with big ice blue eyes. And then she could have sworn the darn cat winked at her. Epilogue. 2 days later, Morgan settled into the most comfortable chair in the informal living room, a cup of tea in her hand, and Belladonna in her lap.
No.
Somehow, she'd only sustained minor cuts when the tunnel caved in on her, and those were bandaged, along with some small carnelian stones Fiona had shoved in under the gauze. How did you figure out what the real murder weapon was? Fiona looked at Luke, who hovered around Morgan, making sure her teacup was full and her bandages were secure. That was easy. When I heard the description of the kettlebells, I knew that it matched the size and shape of old cannonballs. And what better thing for a pirate treasure hunter to use to bash in a rival's skull than an old cannonball? He spread his hands. Then, once we found the bad guys' boats, it was easy to get on board and find the actual cannonball that did it. We figure the treasure hunters from one group must have killed him on their boat and put him on the cliff as a warning to the members of the other group. I'm just glad you could turn all that over to Overton and get Celeste cleared, Cal said. And put the group of pirates that didn't blow themselves up in jail, so we won't have to worry about them anymore.
Well, you don't have to worry about those pirates.
Well, Overton didn't seem very happy about the evidence. He seemed rather disappointed, but he couldn't argue with it. The two rival groups kind of helped us, since they were getting in the way of each other's efforts. Thankfully, they have both now been neutralized, Luke said. Too bad it took blowing up half our yard to do it. Celeste jerked her chin toward the window, and Morgan felt her stomach clench as she looked outside.
Oh.
The yard was about 20 feet shorter now. A giant half-moon-shaped crater had been blown out of the cliff facing the Atlantic during the explosion which had caused the tunnel on the other end of the yard that
You
Morgan
should really
had
get
been
a
in
guard for
to
that.
cave in. Luckily, she'd been near the surface. Otherwise, she might not be sitting here today. She shivered and scratched Belladonna behind the ears.
Aw.
The cat had saved her. That old treasure was booby-trapped, just like you said it might be. Morgan looked up at Luke. I guess I got lucky that I was far enough away. I'm still not sure exactly how you found me, though. You can thank Jolene for that, Luke said. The tracking devices didn't work because of some strange interference at Sticks and Stones, so I didn't see the treasure hunters sneak in. I tried to run over there when they grabbed you, but I wasn't fast enough. Jolene was the one who figured out to watch the road, and then we knew which direction they took you in. Morgan looked at Jolene, her heart swelling with pride. Thanks, Jolene laughed. Oh, well, I guess those private investigator classes are paying off. And then Jake was smart enough to take a dinghy out from the cove, and he noticed the tunnel in the cliff. It's just above the low tide mark, so it's underwater most of the time. Or, well, it was until it got blown up. They must have been planning to grab you right at low tide to get you in there the whole time. Morgan's stomach churned, remembering the dank ocean smell inside the tunnel. No wonder the smell was so strong. Then the GPS in the Barrette started working, and we were practically on top of you when the explosion happened. Luke looked out the window. There must be a warren of caves and passages out there. If they brought you in on the side of the cliff, and you came out down by the end of your driveway. Morgan remembered the room she'd been in with the iron door. There was a passage leading to it, presumably the one from the cliff, and then the tunnel that she crawled out of. She hadn't seen any sign of other passages, but it was certainly possible. She was just glad she was out of there, safe and sound, with her family. It sounds like you guys did some awesome teamwork to find me. I'm really overwhelmed and grateful, she said, tears pricking the back of her eyes. It was scary down there. We did pretty good work together, Jake said, which helped me make an important decision. Morgan's eyes widened.
Oh.
Oh, really?
Mm.
Yes, I'm quitting the police force and going into private investigation. Jolene is going to work with me. Oh, that's wonderful. Morgan was genuinely pleased. Are you sure you won't miss Overton too much?
Mhm.
Everyone laughed. Not in the least. Jake winked at Morgan. Although, I am sorry I won't be there to keep you girls company when you get arrested. Morgan widened her eyes in mock consternation, and Celeste swatted at Jake playfully. Well, that works out good for me then, Luke said. And why is that? Jake narrowed his eyes at him. Well, Luke looked hesitantly at Morgan, and her
Aww.
stomach flip-flopped. What was he up to? I might have to hire you, because I'm going to be needing some extra help. Since I'm going to be spending less time traveling and more time right here in Noquit. Morgan's heart thumped loudly against her ribcage as he put his hand over hers. Well, I'm glad everyone is safe, and the pirates won't be bothering us anymore. I was kind of hoping we could recover the treasure, but now I guess it's been blown to smithereens. Fiona gazed out the window.
No.
You have plenty of treasure, right up in your attic. Just these boxes alone are worth a lot of money. Cal gestured to the silver box on the table in front of Morgan that it contained the map.
Okay, antique
Morgan picked it
dude.
up. It was a beautiful box. Cal had verified it was solid sterling silver with 20-carat gold edging. Worth a lot just for the metal content alone, but the design and age of the box made the value skyrocket. She opened it up. The inside was lined in blue velvet and was just as beautiful as the outside. Belladonna sat up in her lap and sniffed the edge. Even Belladonna likes it, Morgan said, as the cat pushed her head further into the box. Meow. Belladonna poked her paw into the box, pushing at the lining. Then, with a swipe of her claw, she ripped the lining from the side of the box. Belladonna! Morgan jerked the box away from the cat. Something that had been hidden inside the lining caught her attention.
Belladonna, what'd you do?
She pulled the small piece of paper out. What's that? Celeste asked. Looks like a note. Morgan unfolded the aging paper to reveal old-fashioned writing on the inside. The sea is my love. The ocean's revenge lies below my love. Jolene peered over her shoulder. What's that mean? Morgan put the note on the coffee table. I'm not sure. With the ocean's revenge was the ship that Isaiah Blackmore captained. Does that mean the ship is below the sea? Like sunken? Fiona cocked an eyebrow at the note. No, Luke said, gazing out the window at the Atlantic. I saw the sonar readings on the treasure hunter ship, and there's no sunken treasure out there. Morgan frowned at the note.
Out there?
Maybe it was out there once, and has since been recovered. I mean, the note was written 300 years ago. Yeah, you're probably right, Fiona said. Anyway, I don't know about the rest of you, but I've had enough of pirates and treasure hunts to last me a lifetime. Maybe some things are better off staying dead and buried. Hear, hear.
You say that.
Celeste said.
Say that. You say that like that time doesn't exist.
Morgan clinked her tea mug against the coffee, tea, and juice glasses of everyone else. She'd had enough of pirates and treasure, too. Besides, with 300 years of family members and treasure hunters searching for it, the treasure was probably long gone. Morgan settled back into her chair, ignoring the niggling of doubt that was tugging at her gut. She had everything she needed, right in this room. Her sisters, her good friends Jake and Cal, Belladonna, and Luke. And since it looked like Luke was going to be sticking around for a while, she had a feeling that she wasn't going to be very interested in spending her time digging around for buried treasure.
Without him.
No matter what her gut feeling was telling her.